The walnut pistol case should not have looked dangerous beneath candlelight. Yet Nicholas Halewood could not glance toward it, without remembering the sound that had ended one life and divided another into everything before and everything after. It rested beneath his late father's portrait in the long gallery of Halewood House, locked, untouched, and almost respectable among the swords, silver, cups, and family miniatures displayed for the evening's guests. Outside, London carried the warm restlessness of June. Inside, the final echoes of an after-supper fencing exhibition still lingered beneath painted ceilings, while gentlemen loosened their cravats, and ladies gathered near the open terrace doors. Nicholas stood at the center of it all in the dark blue coat expected of the Duke of Redminster, accepting praise he did not need and laughter he had not earned. Across the room, Lord Barnaby Dunstan watched him with the satisfaction of a man who believed he knew exactly where to press. "You're admired tonight, Redminster," Barnaby said, raising his glass, "though I suspect the title does most of the work." Nicholas turned from a young baronet who had been describing the superiority of French foils. "Does it? Of course it does. Take away the dukedom, the estates, and the Halewood name, and what remains?" Barnaby's daughter, Lady Constance Dunstan, stood nearby in pale green silk, her smile carefully modest. Several gentlemen looked toward her, already aware of the marriage hopes Barnaby had encouraged without ever obtaining Nicholas's consent. Nicholas should have laughed and walked away. Instead, he saw the walnut case beneath his father's portrait and felt the old anger rise, not against Barnaby alone but against every polished room in which truth could be arranged by rank. "Enough remains," Nicholas said, "to make any woman in this gallery love me within 6 weeks." The nearest conversation stopped. Barnaby's smile widened. Any woman, then choose." A low murmur passed through the gallery. One of the gentlemen produced the small betting book in which the same circle recorded wagers, involving horses, cards, and feats of vanity, too foolish to deserve permanent ink. "Shall I enter it?" he asked. Nicholas heard his own pride answer before judgment could intervene. "Enter it." The gentleman bent over the book. "The Duke of Redminster wagers that within 6 weeks he may inspire sincere affection in any lady or woman present whom he names tonight." "Sincere affection?" Barnaby asked. "Love," Nicholas replied. "Write the word plainly." Constance lowered her lashes, though pleasure brightened her face. Nicholas looked past her. Debutantes clustered beneath chandeliers. Married women watched him over painted fans. Widows stood in discreet groups near the terrace, protected by age, rank, or long practice in being ignored. Then he saw the one woman who had not looked at him once. Mrs. Imogen Kershaw stood near a cabinet of miniatures at the far end of the gallery, dressed in unadorned black silk. At 34, she had none of the eager softness the room expected from a woman being noticed by a duke. Her dark hair was arranged with severe simplicity. A small oval miniature hung from a black ribbon at her throat. Nicholas knew the case before he saw the unfinished profile within it. Matthew, 7 years dead and still present between them. Imogen held a fine brush and examined a cracked Halewood miniature beneath a shaded lamp. She had been commissioned to restore it, not invited to parade beneath chandeliers. No one stood beside her except Mrs. Maud Kershaw, Matthew's aunt, who sat several yards away with the guarded patience of a woman accustomed to defending respectability without appearing to do so. Barnaby followed Nicholas's gaze. The color left his face, not her. The words were quiet, but Nicholas heard them. "Why not?" Barnaby recovered too slowly. "Because she is unsuitable for the joke." "You called it a wager. Then choose Lady Constance. Choose a woman who understands the spirit of the thing." Nicholas looked again at Imogen. She had lifted her head now. Her eyes met his across the gallery, steady and unreadable. She knew what he had done in 1811. Perhaps not all of it, but enough. Matthew's dying words had placed Nicholas in the keeper's lodge forever. Nicholas saw. He had spent 7 years ensuring that no official account admitted what he had seen. Choosing Imogen was reckless. It was cruel. It was also the first honest response Barnaby had drawn from him all evening. "Mrs. Kershaw," Nicholas said. The gentleman with the betting book paused. "You choose Mrs. Kershaw. I do?" Barnaby set down his glass too hard. Constance's smile disappeared. Nearby guests turned toward Imogen with the avidity reserved for scandal that had not yet decided whether to be amusing or ruinous. Imogen placed her brush on the table and covered the miniature she had been storing. She did not move toward Nicholas. That restraint forced him to cross the room beneath every watching eye. He stopped at a proper distance. "Mrs. Kershaw, your grace." Her curtsy was exact and shallow. Constance followed close behind. "How extraordinary," she said. "I had not realized tradeswomen were included among this evening's guests." The insult landed softly enough to invite denial. Nicholas saw Imogen's fingers tighten once around the edge of the work table. "Mrs. Kershaw is the widow of Captain Matthew Kershaw," he said, allowing his voice to carry. "She is also a commissioned artist whose skill was requested by my household. She is here under my invitation and entitled to every courtesy of this house." Constance's cheeks warmed. "I meant no discourtesy." "Then none should be repeated." Barnaby approached before the silence could settle. "Redminster, surely this is unnecessary." "Courtesy is rarely unnecessary." Nicholas returned his attention to Imogen. "May I ask you to walk one circuit of the gallery with me?" Her gaze moved briefly to Barnaby, then to the betting book still open in the gentleman's hands. She did not know what had been written. She knew only that something had changed the room around her. "One circuit," she said. "No more." Nicholas offered his gloved hand. Imogen looked at it long enough for him to understand that acceptance was not surrender. Then she placed her gloved fingers lightly upon his. The contact was formal, cool, and governed entirely by etiquette. They began walking. Conversation restarted behind them in fragments. Nicholas did not guide her toward the terrace or away from the watching guests. Imogen had permitted one circuit of the gallery, not privacy. "You have surprised your friends," she said. "They recover quickly, do you?" "Not always." They passed portraits of Halewood ancestors who had survived wars, bad marriages, and inherited self-importance. Imogen's gaze remained forward. "Lady Constance believes you defended me. She insulted you." "Those are not the same thing." Nicholas glanced at her. "What distinction do you make? A man may silence an insult because it offends his sense of order. Protection requires him to consider what the injured person wants." The answer struck closer than she could know, or perhaps exactly as close as she intended. "And what did you want?" "To finish my work without becoming the evening's entertainment." Nicholas felt the wager like a weight beneath his ribs. "You are not entertainment to me." "No." She finally looked at him. "Then what am I?" Before he could answer, they reached the center of the gallery and the walnut pistol case beneath his father's portrait. Nicholas's step altered. Barely. Imogen noticed. Her hand remained on his arm, but the formal contact seemed suddenly more binding than any grip. "That case," she said. "It belonged to your father." "Yes. It was at Bexborough 7 years ago." Nicholas kept his face still. "Many things were." "Not that." She stopped. Etiquette required him to stop with her. Around them, guests pretended not to listen. Barnaby stood near the betting book, watching with open alarm now. Imogen's gaze moved from the case to Nicholas. Beneath the black ribbon at her throat, Matthew's unfinished miniature rested against her pulse. "You promised to bring him home," she said. Nicholas could not lie about the promise. "I remember." "Do you remember what you brought me instead?" His breath tightened. "Imogen, Mrs. Kershaw." "Mrs. Kershaw," he corrected. Her expression did not soften. "Matthew told me Lord Roxford fired before the count was finished." By 11 the next morning, Nicholas Halewood had received no reply to the card he sent to Bloomsbury. At noon, a messenger returned with an answer. Mrs. Kershaw would receive his grace at 3 o'clock, provided Mrs. Maud Kershaw remained in the adjoining workroom, and the connecting door stood open. Nicholas arrived 5 minutes early. Imogen appeared in a plain gray gown beneath a dark apron, with no ornament except the unfinished miniature at her throat. The studio smelled of linseed oil, warmed ivory, and ground pigment. North light fell across a table crowded with brushes, magnifying lenses, and portraits no larger than a man's palm. Maud sat beyond the open door with a basket of mending, close enough to hear every word. Imogen indicated a straight-backed chair but did not offer tea. "You asked to see me," Nicholas said. "I asked whether you would come. You knew I would." "Yes." She removed Matthew's miniature from its black ribbon and opened the oval case. His profile faced left, delicately rendered, while the space behind him remained bare ivory. "I want you to look at him before you answer me." Nicholas obeyed. 7 years had not altered the line of Matthew's brow or the slight upward turn of his mouth that had so often preceded some reckless joke. Imogen placed the miniature between them. "He was brought to the keeper's lodge shortly before midnight on the 3rd of October, 1811, she said. The room smelled of lamp smoke and damp wool. Lord Roxford stood near the hearth. You stood beside the table. I remember. That mattered then. It still matters." Her voice did not tremble. "He looked at me and said, 'He fired before 3. Nicholas saw. Afterward you took me outside. You told me there had been an accident during private target practice." "I did." By morning, every servant had learned the same account. "Your father's steward told me scandal would destroy Matthew's name if I repeated anything else." Nicholas looked at Matthew's painted face. "My father gave that order, and you supported it." "Yes." Imogen rested both hands against the edge of the table. "Do you know what I thanked you for?" Nicholas raised his eyes. "I thanked you for preserving his honor. I thanked you for arranging the annuity. I thanked you for keeping Lord Roxford from naming Matthew a drunken fool. You shouldn't ever have had to thank me. But I did. You accepted my gratitude while knowing I'd been given a false choice. My father threatened to end the annuity and use his influence against Matthew's military standing. You've told me what he threatened. I'm asking what you did." Nicholas forced himself not to look away. "I agreed that the duel should be concealed. I repeated the accident account. I allowed you to believe silence was the only way to preserve what remained. You decided what truth I could afford." "Yes." The answer left no shelter between them. Imogen looked down at the miniature. "For 7 years, I've wondered whether Matthew was confused, whether grief changed the words in my memory, whether I built a life around a sentence no one else would confirm. Last night I saw you look at that pistol case. You knew exactly which memory I meant." Nicholas sat at last, because standing above her felt like another use of rank. "The walnut case belonged to my father. It contains the weapons connected to that night." Imogen's gaze sharpened. "Weapons? More than 2? 3 pistols? A duel requires a matched pair." "Yes." "Then why were there 3? "Because Barnaby didn't fire the pistol agreed for him." Maud's needle stopped in the adjoining room. Imogen remained still. "You knew that in 1811? "I knew after Matthew was carried inside. I found the mate to his pistol near the field. It hadn't been fired. And Lord Roxford's, a different pistol, was placed in the walnut case." "By whom?" "I didn't see. Did you ask?" "No, the shame of it was sharper in her workroom, surrounded by tools designed for precision. I locked the case. To preserve the evidence. That's what I told myself. What's the truth? I couldn't destroy it. I was also too much of a coward to expose it." The hinge of Matthew's miniature caught when Imogen tried to close the case. Nicholas noticed the slight misalignment. "May I?" he asked. Imogen studied him before lifting the miniature. Their fingertips touched as she passed it across the table. The contact was brief and unplanned. Nicholas withdrew first, leaving the miniature balanced on her palm. Only then did Imogen place it deliberately in his hand. He examined the hinge without touching the painted ivory. "The pin has shifted. It can be repaired without replacing the hinge." "I know." "Then why leave it?" "Because I haven't decided whether every damaged thing must be made to close properly." Nicholas looked at her. The words were not an invitation. He returned the miniature at once. She accepted it and left it open on the table. "The 3rd pistol," she said. "Where is it now?" "Inside the walnut case at Halewood House. The case hasn't been opened in years." "Who has the key?" "I do." "Who else knows what's inside?" "My late father knew there were 3 pistols. Barnaby knows. I can't be certain who else saw them that night." "Lady Constance?" "I don't know what Barnaby has told her." Imogen paused. And last night she had seen the open betting book and the room's reaction, but she did not know the terms. "What do you believe happened?" Nicholas asked. "I believe Lord Roxford wanted you to perform for his amusement. I believe you chose me because it frightened him. I don't know what you promised." Nicholas had one chance to answer honestly. Pride, shame, and fear rose together. He chose the smaller truth and hated himself for it. I allowed him to provoke me into a foolish public challenge. That isn't the same as telling me its terms. No, then we'll return to it. The postponement felt like a mark placed beside an unpaid debt. First, the pistols. You won't open the case alone. Agreed. You won't move it before its position and condition are recorded. Agreed. A solicitor and your steward will attend. Mrs. Maud and I will be present. Every pistol will be described. The case will be sealed afterward and transferred beyond your private control. Mr. Finch has a strong room in Chancery Lane. Mr. Copley can identify the case and household custody. They'll come to the portrait gallery. The case will be examined where it stands before anyone carries it elsewhere. Yes. Imogen closed Matthew's miniature despite the stubborn hinge. I don't want money from you. I know. You don't. She threaded the ribbon through her fingers. I don't want a marriage offered as penance. I don't want protection that requires silence. I want one thing. Nicholas waited. Imogen lifted her eyes to his. Not money, not marriage, a truthful death. The words settled into the room more completely than any accusation. Nicholas rose. The inventory will begin tomorrow, yes. What follows depends on whether you tell the truth after the case is opened. He bowed his head. Then I'll begin there. At the door, Imogen spoke again. Your Grace, Nicholas turned. If you ever decide for me what truth I can afford again, don't call it protection. He met her gaze. I won't. It was a promise he had already broken once in another form. And as he left the studio, the knowledge followed him like the sound of a count that had never reached 3. The walnut pistol case remained exactly where Nicholas had left it, beneath his father's portrait, untouched since the previous evening, and guarded now by more witnesses than had stood beside it in 7 years. At 10 o'clock on the 12th of June, Mr. Finch arrived at Halewood House with a leather folio, 2 lengths of ribbon, sealing wax, and a clerk who carried a portable writing board. Mr. Copley, the Halewood steward, waited near the gallery doors. Imogen stood beside Mrs. Maud Kershaw beneath the north windows, Matthew's unfinished miniature resting against the black ribbon at her throat. Nicholas held the key, but did not approach the case until Mr. Finch had finished recording the room itself. The case is positioned beneath the portrait of the late Duke of Redminster, the solicitor said while his clerk wrote. 4 feet from the west wall, directly upon the lower shelf of the display cabinet, no covering, no visible seal. He bent without touching it. The brass corners are dulled. The lock plate bears 2 old scratches and no fresh scoring. There is a clean line in the dust where the case meets the shelf, but no sign it has been recently lifted. Mr. Copley stepped forward when asked. I recognize the case. It has remained in this gallery by His late Grace's order. Has it been opened since the fencing supper? Not to my knowledge. Moved? No. Mr. Finch looked at Nicholas. Who holds the key? I do. Has any duplicate been made? Not by my order. That isn't the same answer, Imogen said. Nicholas met her gaze. I don't know whether my father kept another. Mr. Finch recorded the uncertainty. He then asked Nicholas to place the key on a folded cloth. The clerk noted its shape before Mr. Finch lifted it. The movement of the case will now be witnessed, he said. Mr. Copley and the clerk each took one side. They carried it only a few yards to a broad table beneath the north windows, where the light was clear and even. The clerk recorded the transfer before Mr. Finch inserted the key. Nicholas stood opposite Imogen. Barnaby was not present, yet the space he had occupied 7 years earlier seemed to enter the gallery with the soft turn of the lock. Mr. Finch opened the lid. Green baize lined the fitted interior. 3 pistols rested inside. 2 bore the Halewood crest and had been made as a matched pair. The third was narrower through the grip, plainer in its metalwork, and lacking the family mark. Imogen did not move closer until Mr. Finch invited her. You may observe, Mrs. Kershaw, but no weapon should be handled except at my direction. Agreed. Nicholas recognized the first pistol at once. Matthew had carried it at Cinderdown. Beside it lay the matched mate Nicholas had found unfired near the marking stone. The third weapon occupied a hollow that had not been cut for it. A strip of felt had been pressed along one side to keep it from shifting. Mr. Finch examined each pistol without removing any plate or grip. He dictated length, condition, crest, and visible markings. The clerk wrote steadily. "The matched pair appear similar in weight and mechanism," Mr. Finch said. "The third differs in maker and fitting." Imogen looked toward Nicholas. "You saw that difference in 1811. "Yes, and locked all three together." "Yes, Mr. Finch tested no mechanism until every exterior detail had been recorded. Then, with the pistols unloaded and pointed toward the stone hearth, he asked Nicholas to identify which had been intended for Barnaby. Nicholas indicated the unfired mate. Mr. Finch applied slow pressure to its trigger. It resisted until his finger tightened firmly. He repeated the motion with Matthew's pistol. The response appeared comparable. When he tested the third, the lock released beneath noticeably lighter pressure. The click was small, but Maud's breathing changed beside Imogen. "Did you know of that difference?" Imogen asked. "No," Nicholas said, "not then." "Did Lord Roxford?" "I can't answer for what he knew." "But the pistol was his." "I believed so." Mr. Finch turned the weapon beneath the light. Near the base of the grip, part of a serial mark appeared above the fitting. Only the first figures were visible, a 2, then a 1. The remainder lay concealed beneath the plate. "I won't remove the grip here," he said. "That requires a competent gunmaker and a further witnessed examination." "Will the mark be recorded as partly concealed?" Imogen asked. "Exactly so." "And the lighter trigger?" "As an observation, not a final conclusion." She nodded. Nicholas watched her study the third pistol. There was no triumph in her face. Evidence did not restore Matthew. It only narrowed the space in which other men could continue lying about him. Mr. Finch replaced each weapon in its original hollow. He closed the lid and locked it. 2 ribbons were passed around the case in opposite directions. Mr. Finch placed his seal over one crossing. Mr. Copley placed the Halewood steward's seal over the other. The key went into a smaller envelope, which was sealed separately and signed across the fold by both men. The clerk prepared a transfer receipt stating the case would travel in Mr. Finch's carriage to his strong room in Chancery Lane. Mr. Finch's clerk and Mr. Copley would accompany it. "The case won't return to private custody without a written order and receipt, Mr. Finch said. Imogen looked at Nicholas. "Including yours." "Including mine," he answered. Only when every signature had been entered did the men lift the sealed case from the table. Imogen watched it leave the portrait gallery. The empty shelf beneath the late Duke's portrait looked more accusing than the case had. By noon, the carriage had departed for Chancery Lane, with Mr. Copley seated beside the clerk. Mr. Finch remained behind to give Imogen a duplicate copy of the inventory and transfer receipt. When he withdrew to the adjoining library, Maud followed at Imogen's request, leaving the door open and remaining within sight. Nicholas did not mistake the small measure of privacy for intimacy. Imogen put the duplicate inventory on the gallery table. "You did what you promised this morning." "Yes. That does not settle what happened last night. The wager." Nicholas felt it return with more force than Barnaby's voice had carried. "No. You said Lord Roxford provoked you into a foolish public challenge." "He did. You still haven't told me its terms." Nicholas chose his next words with the same care Mr. Finch had used around the pistols. That care was itself another form of cowardice. "I made a boast about persuasion." "Concerning whom?" "Women in the gallery." Her eyes sharpened. "And you selected me." "Yes. What did you wager?" He could tell her now. He should. Instead, he heard his father's old argument wearing his own voice. "Secure the evidence first. Control the damage. Do not destroy what might still be saved." "I will tell you," he said, "but I'm asking for time to do it without turning the inquiry into another public spectacle." Imogen's expression became very still. "You're asking me to trust the man who has just admitted he arranged my ignorance for 7 years. I'm asking you to judge what I do next. Then we require terms." She moved to the table where the case had stood. "If there are to be any further meetings, they won't proceed as an ordinary courtship." Agreed. 5 portrait studies. Mrs. Maud or another companion present. The door open. Each public appearance separately accepted. Yes. No jewels. No costly flowers. No private carriage journeys. No interference with my clients, my studio, or my income. Yes. No evidence may be moved without written receipt and independent custody. Agreed. And I may end any sitting, visit, appearance, or association without explanation. Nicholas looked at her. She had not offered affection. She had built an exit. You may. You won't use rank to change my answer. No. You won't call compliance protection. No. Imogen gathered the inventory copy and slipped it into her portfolio. Then the first sitting will be in Bloomsbury on the 15th. You'll come at 2, Mrs. Maud will be present. I'll be there, without an entourage. Of course. And without whatever face you wore last night when you chose me. For the first time that morning, Nicholas almost smiled. He stopped before the expression became charm. Imogen noticed. That, she said quietly. That is the face I mean. Nicholas bowed. Then I'll try to arrive without it. She turned toward Maud, ending the conversation. Nicholas remained in the emptied gallery after the women had gone. Before the afternoon was over, a note reached Barnaby Dunstan informing him that the Walnut case had left Halewood House under 2 seals. Barnaby read it twice. Lady Constance watched him from across the drawing-room. "What has she found?" she asked. Barnaby folded the paper until the crease split. "Not enough." "Then why are you afraid?" He looked toward the door, as if Nicholas and Imogen might already be standing beyond it. "Because if she paints his true face, she may teach him to show it." Nicholas arrived at the Bloomsbury studio wearing enough rank to ruin the portrait before Imogen had made a single mark. At 2 o'clock on the 15th of June, he stepped through the open door in a dark coat crossed by the blue sash of his order, a silver star at his breast, and the expression of a man prepared to be observed without being seen. Mrs. Maud Kershaw sat in the adjoining workroom, sorting narrow ivory frames within clear hearing. Imogen stood beside the easel in a gray gown and paint-stained apron. She looked once at Nicholas, once at the chair beneath the north window, and then at the insignia. "You'll have to remove those." Nicholas glanced down. "The sash and star? All visible evidence that 12 generations of Halewoods are sitting for me. I understood this was to be a study of the Duke of Redminster. It's a study of the man who becomes the Duke whenever someone looks at him." Maud's hands paused over the frames. Nicholas shut the door only far enough to remove his coat, then remembered the terms and left it open. He unfastened the sash and star and placed them on a side table where Imogen directed. Without the symbols of office, he seemed less armored. "Will that satisfy you?" he asked. "Sit down and I'll decide." He took the straight-backed chair. Imogen adjusted its angle by several inches, then moved his left hand from his knee to the chair arm without touching him, chin slightly lower. He obeyed. "Not humbled," she said. "Only human. You ask a great deal at the first sitting. You agreed to 5. She lifted a stick of charcoal. Nicholas settled into stillness. Imogen mapped the line of his shoulders and the severe balance of his face. Each time she looked up, he met her gaze with polished calm. Then she asked, "What did Lord Roxford say before you made the challenge?" His right eyebrow rose a fraction. A heartbeat later, charm softened his mouth. Imogen lowered the charcoal. There what?" "The moment before you perform. The charm vanished. My eyebrow? Your decision. The eyebrow merely announces it. I hadn't known I possessed such a herald. Most men don't notice the servant who opens the door for them." Nicholas looked almost amused, but she had already returned to the page. He let the silence remain. Outside, wheels rolled over the street and vendors called beneath the windows. The studio held the muted sounds of labor rather than society. Brushes clicked in jars. Maud turned pages in an account book. Imogen's charcoal moved across paper with a dry, soft whisper. A heavy carriage struck a loose stone below. The sharp crack of wood against iron broke through the room. Imogen's hand stopped. The charcoal snapped between her fingers. For one breath, she did not move at all. Nicholas saw the color leave her face and understood that the sound had become another sound in another place. He did not say Matthew's name. He did not rise, cross the room, or ask a question that would force her to answer before Maud. He remained still until Imogen looked down at the broken charcoal in her palm. "The street is badly kept," he said. "So are many things," she replied. Her voice was even, but she selected a new charcoal with more care than necessary. Nicholas allowed her to decide whether the sitting continued. She did. After several minutes, she said, "You may stop arranging your face now. I wasn't aware that I had. You were attempting to look sincere. Was I failing? Completely. What expression would you prefer? One you haven't chosen." Nicholas considered the impossible instruction. That seems unfair. Portraiture is often cruel to men who depend upon preparation, and kind to women who don't. Women are trained to prepare every expression before men decide what it means. The reply silenced him. Imogen studied his face again. Think of something that has nothing to do with being admired, such as, that is your problem. He looked toward the open door, where Maud had turned away to conceal the beginning of a smile. Mrs. Maud appears to be enjoying my difficulty. I'm enjoying Mrs. Kershaw charging a duke by the hour to discover he has no natural expression, Maud said. Nicholas laughed before he could prevent it. The sound was low, startled, and entirely without calculation. Imogen laughed too. It escaped her as softly as a brush falling onto cloth, but it changed her whole face. Nicholas looked at her. Imogen looked back. For one suspended moment, neither of them performed. The room narrowed to the space between easel and chair, warm with something too new to name and too dangerous to trust. Imogen broke the gaze first. She lifted the charcoal. Do that again. Laugh? Forget yourself. I don't know how. Then we may require all 5 sittings. When Nicholas returned on the 18th, he wore no sash, no star, and no expression composed for victory. He arrived alone, handed his hat and gloves to no servant, and took the chair only after Imogen indicated it. The first charcoal study lay partly covered inside an open portfolio near the easel. She had caught the unguarded softness after laughter, but not the restraint that followed. You left the background empty, Nicholas said, noticing Matthew's miniature on the work table. Yes. Why? Because peaceful backgrounds are lies when the world around a face is not peaceful. Imogen adjusted the lamp near his shoulder. I tried a garden once, then a pale sky. Both looked like forgiveness someone else had granted on my behalf. So you stopped. I refused to finish the setting until the official lie was removed. Nicholas looked at Matthew's painted profile. I haven't sat for a portrait since he died. Imogen paused. There are portraits of you at Halewood House, completed before Cinderdown or painted from earlier studies. Afterward, I couldn't bear the stillness. Why? Stillness leaves no office to perform, no decision to make, no person to protect before he asks to be protected. His gaze met hers. It leaves only the man who knew what happened and remained silent. The admission stayed between them without asking for comfort. Imogen resumed drawing. Hold that expression. Shame? Honesty. A knock sounded at the outer door before the sitting ended. Maud answered, and returned with Lady Constance Dunstan, who entered in a cream walking dress with a maid several paces behind. Mrs. Kershaw, forgive the intrusion, Constance said. I was nearby and wondered whether you accept commissions for mourning miniatures. Her eyes moved immediately to Nicholas in the chair. Your Grace, I hadn't realized you would be here. The sitting was scheduled, Imogen said. Constance smiled. Naturally. While Imogen covered her materials, Constance looked around the room with careful curiosity. She noticed the outer door, the adjoining workroom. The high windows opened for air, and the woman hired twice weekly to beat dust from the curtains. Her gaze settled on the partly covered charcoal study. She stepped closer. How intimate. Imogen closed the portfolio. Professional. Of course, though the Duke appears less guarded than society usually sees him. That is the purpose of a study. Nicholas rose. Lady Constance, did you come to discuss a commission? Among other things, invitations have gone out for Bexborough. My father has already accepted. Her attention returned to Imogen. I wondered whether Mrs. Kershaw knew she was included. I've received no invitation, Imogen said. Nicholas did not answer for her. One will be sent, he said. Mrs. Kershaw may decline without offense. Constance's smile sharpened. Bexborough can be uncomfortable for those unfamiliar with country house expectations. Imogen tied the portfolio ribbon. Then it will be useful to discover whether the discomfort belongs to the guest or the house. Constance left without discussing a miniature. Nicholas watched the closed door. You don't have to accept. No. Imogen placed the fresh charcoal study beside Matthew's unfinished miniature. But Lord Roxford will be there. Yes. She met Nicholas's gaze. Then send the invitation. Imogen saw Bexborough House, first through a break in the beeches, its pale stone frontage rising above the Sussex fields with the still confidence of a place that had never needed to ask permission to exist. The hired carriage had left London shortly after 7 that morning, and changed horses once beyond Croydon. By the time the long western drive came into view on the 22nd of June, dust had settled along the hem of Imogen's traveling dress, and Mrs. Maud Kershaw had declared twice that ducal estates ought to be taxed according to the length of their approaches. Imogen kept one hand on the portfolio beside her. Nicholas's charcoal study remained inside, tied beneath the same dark ribbon she had fastened in Bloomsbury. Matthew's unfinished miniature rested at her throat. Nicholas had offered a Halewood carriage for the journey. Imogen had refused. He had accepted the refusal without sending another. That mattered more than the offer. A steward received them beneath the portico and conducted them to adjoining chambers in the east wing. Imogen's room overlooked the formal garden rather than the grand approach. A plain work table had been placed near the window at her request, with no flowers, costly welcome gifts, or ornamental distractions. Maud's chamber opened through a small private passage beside it. "His Grace followed your instructions," Maud said, after the servants withdrew. "Every one of them." Imogen untied her bonnet. "Following instructions for one morning is not a character. No, but it's more useful than roses." Dinner proved less peaceful. Guests had already assembled when Imogen entered the drawing-room beside Maud. Lady Constance stood near the hearth in silver-blue silk, one hand resting upon her father's arm. Barnaby had not yet arrived, but his daughter carried his confidence well enough for both of them. Nicholas crossed the room only after Imogen acknowledged him. He wore a black evening coat with no sash, though the household silver, the servants' deference, and every portrait on the walls announced his title without assistance. "Mrs. Kershaw, Mrs. Maud, was the journey tolerable?" "The roads were better than their reputation," Imogen said. "That may be the kindest thing anyone has said of Surrey." His mouth almost curved. Constance approached before the moment could soften. "Mrs. Kershaw, I understand you have been placed near Lady Granville at dinner." "So I was informed. There may have been an error. Lady Granville is a viscountess. Your place would more naturally be farther down." The remark was quiet enough to sound administrative. Several guests heard it anyway. Nicholas did not answer immediately. He turned to Imogen. "The place assigned to you is beside Lady Granville, who specifically asked to meet the artist restoring the Halewood miniatures. Do you wish to keep it?" The question altered the room. He had not declared where Imogen belonged. He had returned the decision to her. "Yes," she said. "I do. Then it remains yours." Constance's smile thinned. "Naturally, if Mrs. Kershaw prefers it." "I prefer not to be moved after I've arrived," Imogen replied. Lady Granville proved to be a silver-haired widow with keen gray eyes, and none of the Langar society often mistook for refinement. She asked informed questions about ivory preparation, pigment stability, and the difficulty of restoring a miniature without erasing the hand of the original artist. Before the first course ended, Imogen understood why Nicholas had placed them together. Lady Granville was not a decorative patron. She knew the price of work and the cost of being treated as though skill were merely a genteel amusement. Nicholas sat several places away. He did not draw Imogen into conversation across the table or invite the company to observe his interest. Once, when Lady Granville made Imogen laugh, his gaze lifted toward the sound. Their eyes met for a moment. He looked away first. The restraint warmed her more than pursuit would have done, which was precisely why she distrusted it. The following afternoon, Imogen entered the Western Gallery with Maud to inspect a cabinet of 17th-century miniatures whose door had begun to warp. The room stretched above the gardens, lined with sporting trophies, fencing foils, old hunting sketches, and portraits of Halewood men who had considered serious expressions a form of inheritance. Nicholas joined them in a plain dark coat and remained near the windows while Imogen examined the cabinet. "The lower hinge has drawn away from the frame," she said. "If the wood is forced, the glass may crack." A small gallery step had been provided so she could inspect the upper corner. Maud stood several yards away beside an open window, sorting the notes Imogen had made. Nicholas held the cabinet door steady without touching the wood itself. "Can it be repaired here?" he asked. Yes, if your carpenter understands that strength is not the same as pressure, I'll warn him that the distinction is being observed. Imogen descended one step, then paused when the narrow heel of her shoe caught against the edge. Nicholas moved closer but did not reach for her. He offered one ungloved hand, palm upward. May I? The question was so simple that it exposed every occasion when men had touched first and explained later. Imogen looked at his hand, then placed hers in it. His fingers closed with careful firmness. He did not pull. He only steadied her as she stepped down to the carpet. For one breath, after both her feet were secure, neither released the other. The warmth of his palm traveled through her fingers with a quietness more dangerous than charm. Then Imogen looked beyond his shoulder and saw the fencing mask. It hung among a row of foils and leather guards, its dark mesh dulled by age. A small brass plate beneath it bore a name she could read from where she stood: Captain Matthew Kershaw. Her fingers tightened around Nicholas's hand before she could stop them. He followed her gaze. His own hand remained still. He did not cover hers with the other, did not draw her toward him, and did not speak until she chose to. "Why is it here?" she asked. Matthew fenced at Bexborough often. Nicholas's voice had lost every trace of performance. "He was better than I was. He told me you cheated. Only when losing honestly became tedious." The memory came so suddenly that Imogen could almost hear Matthew laughing as he described Nicholas stepping beyond the marked line and insisting the carpet had moved. Pain followed, but it did not erase the warmth. She released Nicholas's hand. He released hers at once. "The mask should not have been displayed without your knowledge," he said. "It belonged to him. It was left here after his death. Then it should have been returned to me." Nicholas looked at the brass plate. Yes, he did not offer an excuse based on grief or household oversight. "It will remain where it is until you decide what should be done with it." Imogen turned toward the windows. Beyond the gardens, the land rose toward a dense line of western trees. "Where is Cinderdown Field?" Nicholas came to stand beside her, leaving a proper space between them. "Beyond those woods, about 30 minutes by a state carriage, and the keeper's lodge still standing. No one lives there now." Maud approached, her papers lowered. "Is the road passable?" "Yes," Nicholas said. "A carriage can reach the eastern track. The last distance must be walked." Imogen watched the distant beach line. 7 years had turned the place into something larger than geography. She had imagined it in rain, mist, frost, and darkness, though Matthew had never described the weather. "I want to see it." Nicholas's posture changed, not with reluctance, but with the weight of what he had known would come. "I can take you tomorrow, Mrs. Maud will accompany us, and a footman will remain within sight." "You'll offer," Imogen said. "I'll decide in the morning." "Of course." Wheels sounded on the drive below. A dark traveling carriage emerged between the trees and crossed the forecourt faster than dignity required. The crest on its door belonged to House Dunstan. Barnaby had arrived a day earlier than expected. He stepped from the carriage before the footmen had fully lowered the steps. Looking up toward the gallery windows, he saw Nicholas and Imogen standing beneath Matthew's fencing mask. Even at that distance, Imogen recognized the instant his confidence failed. Nicholas saw it too. "He knows why I'm here," she said. "He knows what you might find. Men like Lord Roxford don't reconsider because others retreat." Imogen touched Matthew's miniature through the fabric at her throat. "Then tomorrow, I won't retreat." The road to Cinderdown Field narrowed after the estate carriage passed the western woods, and by the time Nicholas ordered the driver to stop beside the eastern track, the wheels had begun pressing deep lines into the summer grass. Imogen descended without assistance. Mrs. Maud Kershaw followed with the footman, who remained several paces behind as propriety required. Nicholas stood beside the carriage in a plain dark coat, one hand resting against the open door, but not extended toward Imogen. He had offered to take her. He had not assumed she would need him once they arrived. Ahead, the field opened beneath a line of old beeches. The keeper's lodge stood near the far edge, smaller than the building Imogen had carried in memory for 7 years. Its gray stone walls caught the morning light. No storm darkened the sky. No wind bent the trees. The ordinary beauty of the place felt like an insult. "Where did they stand?" she asked. Nicholas pointed toward 2 breaks in the grass. Matthew was near the first beach. Barnaby faced him from there, and you between them, but farther back. I was acting as Matthew's second. Imogen walked ahead before he could say more. The grass brushed her hem. Matthew's miniature rested beneath the black ribbon at her throat. Its damaged hinge closed against her skin. 12 paces separated the 2 places Nicholas had indicated. She counted them without speaking. At the first beach, she turned toward the lodge. He would have seen that door, yes. Did he look toward it? Nicholas's face tightened. Once. Before the count? Yes. What did you think he was looking for? A reason to leave. The answer stopped her. Nicholas remained several feet away. Maud and the footman had halted near the carriage, close enough to see them but far enough that every word did not carry. "And did you give him one?" Imogen asked. Nicholas looked toward the lodge. No, she waited. When he offered nothing more, she knew the truth had reached another wall. "Show me where the count began." Nicholas moved to the place he had occupied 7 years earlier. He did not demonstrate with raised arm or imagined weapon. He merely stood there. Imogen faced him from Matthew's position. "Say it." His breath changed. "Imogen, say what you said that night." Nicholas looked at her with a grief that did not ask to be forgiven. 1. The field seemed to contract around the word. Then, 2. Imogen heard Matthew's voice from the lodge, weak but certain. He fired before 3. Nicholas saw. Her hands began to cool. She pressed them together, but the tremor had already started at her fingers. Nicholas saw it. He removed one glove and opened his hand between them, palm upward. He did not step closer. "You don't have to take it," he said. Imogen looked at the offered hand. It had held the key to the walnut case. It had signed transfer receipts. It had once promised to bring Matthew home. It had also remained still when she tightened her grip beneath the fencing mask. She could refuse comfort. She could accept it without surrendering judgment. The choice belonged to her. Imogen placed her hand in his. Nicholas closed his fingers around hers slowly. His hold was warm and steady, with no pressure to draw her nearer. "I reached the lodge after midnight," she said. "A boy came for me from Bexborough village. No one would tell me what had happened on the road. I thought Matthew had fallen from a horse." Nicholas's thumb moved once against the side of her hand, then stopped. The lamp smoked. His coat was folded beneath his head. Lord Roxford stood by the hearth as though he had every right to remain. "You were beside the table." She looked past Nicholas toward the lodge. "Matthew knew me. I was afraid he would not." "He knew you at once," Nicholas said. "Yes." Her fingers tightened. "He looked at me and said he fired before 3. Nicholas saw. He tried to say something else. I leaned close, but I couldn't understand it. "Then you took me outside." Nicholas's face had gone still. "I told you there had been an accident. You told me he had been practicing with pistols." "Yes." "You knew that was false." "Yes. And by morning every servant repeated it. I gave the household the account." Imogen drew a careful breath. His hand remained around hers. He did not say that Matthew had suffered little. He did not tell her grief had altered memory. He allowed every sentence to stand without correction. "When did you know the wrong pistol had been used?" she asked. "After Matthew was carried inside, I returned to the field and found the mate to his pistol near the marking stone. It had not been fired, and the third pistol? Someone had placed it in the walnut case. You did not see who?" "No." "You did not ask?" "No." "You locked the case?" "Yes." Imogen turned toward him. "Because you intended to preserve the evidence?" "Partly." Nicholas did not look away. "I also locked it because I was afraid of what opening the truth would expose. Your father, my father, Barnaby, my own conduct, and me. What the truth would do to you became the reason I used most often." His voice lowered. "It was not the only reason. The admission was more honest than the defense, but it remained incomplete." Imogen could feel the omission between them as clearly as the space where the count had failed. "You're still deciding the order in which I may know you," she said. Nicholas's hand tightened only enough to acknowledge the blow. "Yes." "Then this is not the whole confession." No, her heart hurt at the answer because it was true. She had wanted him to deny the hidden chamber. She withdrew her hand. Nicholas released her at once. The warmth remained in her palm, a comfort she had chosen and ended. "Take me to the lodge," she said. They crossed the field with Maud and the footman following. The keeper's lodge door stood unlatched. Inside, dust softened the boards and pale light entered through a narrow window. A plain wooden table remained near the cold hearth. Imogen stopped beside it. Was this the table? Yes. Nicholas remained at the doorway. He did not enter farther until she looked at him. Imogen placed her fingertips on the worn edge. The wood offered no proof of what had happened upon it. No stain, mark, or carved name distinguished it from 100 other tables. Mrs. Kershaw? The voice came from outside. An elderly laborer stood near Maud, his cap held against his chest. His back was bent, but his gaze moved sharply from Imogen to Nicholas. "Forgive me, Mom. I saw the carriage and wondered whether this day had come." Nicholas recognized him. "Mr. Hale, you worked the western fields. 40 years, Your Grace." Before my knees lost the argument, the attempt at humor failed beneath his unease. Imogen stepped into the doorway. "Did you know Captain Kershaw?" "Only by sight, but I knew Edwin Rusk, the groundskeeper, then." Nicholas's attention sharpened. "Rusk left Bexborough after Matthew died. Before the week was done," Hale said. "Took his daughter and every possession that would fit in a cart." "Why?" Imogen asked. Hale glanced toward the beach line. "He told me he'd heard something no poor man was meant to hear. Said a gentleman's servant came to his cottage before sunrise and advised him to forget the Count." Nicholas stepped forward. "Whose servant?" "He wouldn't give the name. He was frightened for his daughter's husband. Said they'd lose their cottage and his place if Edwin spoke." "Where did he go?" Imogen asked. "Lewes, or near enough. His daughter married into a wheelwright family. Mercer was the name, I think. Edwin said if anyone ever wanted the truth, they'd have to find him before the gentleman did." The field no longer felt empty. Somewhere in Sussex lived a man who had carried one piece of that night beyond the reach of House Halewood and House Dunstan. Nicholas looked at Imogen. "Mr. Finch can begin searching today. Mr. Finch may help when I instruct him." Nicholas inclined his head. "Of course. You won't send Halewood's servants to Edwin's door." "No." "You won't move him to Bexborough or decide where he's safest." "No. I'll lead the search." "Yes." Hale watched them, uncertain whether a duke had just yielded authority or merely postponed it. Imogen touched Matthew's miniature through the fabric at her throat. The hinge pressed lightly against her fingers. "We return to the house," she said. "Then Mrs. Maud and I will make arrangements for Lewes." Nicholas did not ask to accompany her. "I'll wait to be asked." Imogen looked once more across the field where the Count had ended before truth could answer it. "Then wait," she said. By the morning of the 27th of June, Lord Roxford had turned Bexborough's south lawn into a theater for Imogen's humiliation. Targets stood beneath the lime trees beside polished bows, silver urns, and breakfast tables. Neighboring families arrived on less than 2 days' notice to what Barnaby had called an informal archery breakfast. Imogen knew better. Since leaving Cinderdown Field, she had written to a parish clerk in Lewes, engaged a hired carriage for the following morning, and asked Mr. Finch to identify wheelwright families named Mercer without sending any Halewood servant to their doors. She could have departed before the gathering. Maud had urged her to do so. Imogen chose to attend because absence would leave Barnaby free to name her fear. She entered in unadorned black silk, with Matthew's unfinished miniature at her throat and Maud beside her. Nicholas stood near the first target speaking with Lady Granville and 2 landowners. He saw Imogen at once. His attention moved to her face, then toward Barnaby, who waited beneath the largest awning with Lady Constance. Nicholas did not cross the lawn. He had heard her command at Cinderdown. He would wait to be asked. Constance came instead, carrying a pale yew-bough as though it were a scepter. "Mrs. Kershaw, I'm pleased you felt strong enough to join us after your excursion. Walking through a field did not weaken me. Grief can produce delayed effects. So can guilt." Constance's smile held, but her fingers tightened around the bow. Before she could answer, Barnaby struck a spoon against his glass. Conversation thinned beneath the awnings. "Forgive an interruption," he said. "His Grace and I have an unfinished matter of sport, and it seems only fair that the lady most concerned should understand it." Nicholas went still. Imogen saw recognition enter his face before she understood the danger. A footman brought Barnaby a folded sheet. Two gentlemen near him shifted with the unease of men who had agreed to witness cruelty while it remained amusing. Barnaby opened the paper. On the 10th of June, after the fencing exhibition at Halewood House, the Duke of Redminster declared that he could make any woman present love him within 6 weeks. A few men laughed. No woman did. The wager was entered in a betting book that remains in London. This is a copied transcription, signed by gentlemen who heard the terms. His gaze settled on Imogen. His Grace was invited to choose the woman. He chose Mrs. Kershaw. Silence followed. Imogen felt Maud move half a step closer but not touch her. Across the lawn, Nicholas looked as though the ground had opened beneath him. Constance lowered her eyes in practiced sorrow. Surely Mrs. Kershaw suspected. A duke does not usually develop so sudden an interest in a professional woman without some extraordinary cause. The first studio visit. The 5 sittings. The unguarded laugh. The hand Nicholas had offered at the gallery step. The open palm at Cinderdown. Those moments did not become false because their beginning had been dishonorable. That made the injury worse. Something genuine had grown inside a game she had not been allowed to name. "I did not know the terms," Imogen said. Her voice carried clearly. "I knew Lord Roxford had provoked His Grace into a public challenge. I asked what had been wagered. His Grace chose not to tell me." Nicholas took one step forward. "Mrs. Kershaw, not yet." He stopped. Barnaby folded the paper with deliberate care. "Then perhaps we should be grateful the misunderstanding has been corrected before Mrs. Kershaw mistook curiosity for devotion." "I mistook nothing," Imogen said. "I permitted supervised portrait sittings under written conditions. I accepted no jewels, no private journeys, and no promise of marriage. The only person who confused permission with possession was the man who wrote a woman's feelings into a betting book." A murmur moved through the guests. Lady Granville lowered her cup and looked directly at Nicholas, not with pity but judgment. Barnaby's expression hardened. A spirited answer. Yet Mrs. Kershaw's attention has not been confined to portraiture. She has begun repeating an old accusation concerning her husband's death. He made the entire lawn his audience. Captain Matthew Kershaw died 7 years ago after a pistol discharge during private target practice. Grief can alter memory. A widow newly favored by a duke may discover that scandal attracts notice more reliably than mourning. Imogen's hand rose to the miniature at her throat. "Matthew named you before he died." Barnaby gave a small, incredulous laugh. "Did he? He said you fired before the count was finished." A landowner looked toward Nicholas. Constance's face lost color. Barnaby did not. "A count," he repeated. "Then you accuse me of an unlawful duel." "I repeat my husband's final clear words." Barnaby turned to Nicholas. "You were present at the keeper's lodge. You can end this." Nicholas saw the open lawn, the watching county families, the copied wager, and Imogen standing beneath the weight of a truth he had controlled for 7 years. The walnut case was sealed in Chancery Lane. Edwin Rusk had not yet been found. Nothing in the evidence required Nicholas to lie. He could have said the matter belonged before magistrates. He could have refused to answer. He could have admitted his role. Instead, shame reached for the oldest habit he possessed. If he denied the duel, he could stop the scene and decide how much of House Halewood collapsed before breakfast. It was not protection. It was panic dressed in authority. "There was no duel," Nicholas said. The words returned Imogen to the keeper's lodge. Nicholas saw. She had believed his worst betrayal belonged to the past. Now she watched him choose the same sentence with more knowledge, more freedom, and less excuse. Barnaby exhaled softly. Constance's shoulders eased. Someone near the archery line whispered that grief had confused the widow. Nicholas moved toward Imogen. "Listen to me." "No." She lifted the ribbon over her head and removed Matthew's miniature. Imogen crossed the few paces between them and placed the closed oval case upon his archery scorecard. Matthew's likeness covered the space where the next mark would have been written. "You have mistaken grief for a game twice," she said. "I will not permit a third." Nicholas looked down at the miniature. "I was trying to stop this room from—" "You were trying to control it." "Yes." The admission came too late to save anything. But at least he did not replace the lie with another. Imogen took the miniature back before his hand could reach it, and returned it to the black ribbon. "The hand you offered me at Cinderdown was real," she said quietly. "So was the choice you made just now. I will judge both." Pain crossed his face. He did not ask her to judge the better one more heavily. Barnaby stepped forward. "Mrs. Kershaw, a period of rest might spare you further embarrassment." Imogen turned to him. "My embarrassment will survive the morning. Your fear has survived 7 years." Nicholas shifted between Barnaby and Imogen, not close enough to touch her and not claiming her as his to defend. "No one will question Mrs. Kershaw further." Imogen looked at him. "You no longer decide where I stand." "I know. Then don't follow me." Nicholas stepped back. "I won't." As Imogen and Maud crossed the lawn, several guests drew aside. Lady Granville did not. She bowed to Imogen with deliberate respect. Nicholas ordered no carriage and sent no servant after her. He only told the footman to prevent anyone else from doing so. At the entrance, Maud asked, "London?" Imogen looked toward the road east, beyond Bexborough and the power of both noble houses. "Lewes," she said. "Edwin Rusk is somewhere in Sussex, and tomorrow I begin looking for him." The first Mercer family in Lewes had never heard of Edwin Rusk, and the second had buried an Edwin Mercer 12 years earlier, which taught Imogen how quickly hope could become embarrassment when carried to the wrong door. By the afternoon of the 28th of June, rain had begun tapping against the windows of the small inn where she and Maud had taken rooms near the High Street. A parish clerk provided 3 wheelwright names, 2 of them outdated. An elderly widow remembered that a groundskeeper from Bexborough had once come to live with a married daughter, but she could not recall whether the daughter's husband worked in Lewes or a village beyond it. Imogen wrote every answer in a narrow notebook and refused to send word to Nicholas. He had promised to wait. She intended to discover whether he could. On the second morning, a wheelwright near Cliff recognized the name Mercer. "Thomas Mercer's yard is east of town," he said. "His wife's father lives with them, though he doesn't come into the workshop much now." The house stood behind a low fence beside a yard filled with spokes, rims, and the clean scent of cut ash. A boy sanding a wheel stared at Imogen's black gown, then ran inside. Edwin Rusk opened the door himself. He was tall despite the bend in his back, with white hair combed away from a face weathered by outdoor work. His eyes moved first to Imogen, then to the unfinished miniature at her throat. Recognition arrived before welcome. "You're Captain Kershaw's widow." "Yes." Edwin glanced past her toward the lane. "Did the Duke send you?" "No." "Lord Roxford?" "No." "Then how did you find me?" "Mr. Hale remembered your daughter married into a wheelwright family." Edwin's mouth tightened. Hale should forgotten. He began to close the door. Imogen did not block it. "Lord Roxford's steward threatened your family after Matthew died." Edwin stopped. "Who told you that?" "Mr. Hale said you left because someone advised you to forget the Count." The door remained partly open. Maud stood beside Imogen, silent and steady. "I won't give your address to a Halewood servant," Imogen said. "I won't ask you to leave your daughter's home. I won't let anyone take your words away from you. A duke's promise isn't much use to a poor man after the duke changes his mind. Then don't trust his promise." Imogen held his gaze. "Trust the terms you set with me." Edwin studied her for a long moment. From the workshop came the rhythmic scrape of wood against metal. "My grandson works here," he said. "One word from Roxford could ruin the yard. Then your exact address will not enter any public paper. And His Grace, he'll know only what is necessary after your statement is secured." Edwin looked at Matthew's miniature again. "He lied on that lawn, didn't he?" "Yes." Something in Edwin's expression altered. Not trust, but recognition. He opened the door wider. "Come in." His daughter received them in a narrow parlor, where a kettle steamed near the hearth. The door to the passage remained open. Edwin refused tea. He sat opposite Imogen with both hands around the head of his walking stick. "I was near the East Beaches," he said. "I'd gone out before dawn to check a fallen branch. I heard men speaking and stayed back because gentlemen don't like servants knowing their quarrels." "Did you see Captain Kershaw?" "I saw him." Lord Roxford stood opposite. The Duke was between them and farther back. "Did you hear the Count?" "One, then two." Edwin's grip tightened. The shot came before 3. Captain Kershaw hadn't fired. His pistol was still lifting. "And Lord Roxford?" He held the smoking pistol. Imogen's breath shortened, but her voice remained level. "Why did you not tell anyone?" "Roxford's steward came before sunrise. Said I'd mistaken target practice for a dispute. Said Thomas would lose his place, my daughter would lose the cottage, and no magistrate would take my word against a marquess." "Did you speak to Nicholas?" "No. By then I'd seen him helping carry the lie through the house. I didn't know whether he'd protect me or decide I could afford the risk." The words struck with the force of an accusation meant for another man, and still partly deserved by her. "Will you make a signed statement?" Imogen asked. Edwin looked toward the workshop. "Only if you remain beside me. I want every word read back. The Duke won't keep the original." "Agreed." Mr. Finch arrived from London on the 1st of July after receiving Imogen's note. He came without a Halewood carriage, accompanied only by his clerk. Edwin dictated slowly. When he corrected one phrase, the clerk struck it through rather than rewriting the page, and both men initialed the alteration. Mr. Finch read the completed account aloud. Edwin signed. Imogen signed beneath as witness to the making of the statement, not to the truth of events she had not personally seen. The original was sealed in Finch's case. A copy was sealed separately. "His Grace will receive no unsealed copy," Finch said. Edwin nodded once. Only then did he appear able to breathe fully. The serial mark from the pistol inventory gave them the next path. Mr. Finch had written to the London maker named on the third weapon, but the firm had changed hands. An old trade directory led them to a former partner, who remembered a senior gunmaker retiring near Lewes to live with his widowed sister. The first address was empty. The second belonged to a woman who said her brother had died. Only after Maud noticed that the name on the door differed by one letter from the directory did they discover the surviving gunmaker 2 streets away. He was nearly blind in one eye, but remembered noble clients with the precision of a man who had once depended upon their accounts being paid. "Roxford," he said when Finch described the pistol, "wanted the trigger light enough for sport shooting. Too light, in my opinion." His sister brought down a wooden chest of old tickets wrapped in cloth. They searched by year, then by the first visible figures of the serial. Imogen found the vellum slip beneath 3 later receipts. The number read 214. The entry recorded a light-set trigger fitted at Lord Roxford's request several weeks before Matthew's death. The gunmaker examined the ticket with a lens. "This is my hand." "Would the alteration happen through ordinary wear?" Finch asked. "No. Someone had to ask for it. Could it cause a pistol to discharge under less pressure than a standard trigger, considerably less?" Finch sealed the ticket in a separate envelope and signed across the fold. No one celebrated. Evidence was not victory. It was only a narrowing corridor through which the truth might finally pass. That evening, Finch told Imogen he had begun tracing Charles Vale, Barnaby's former second. "He left England within a year of Captain Kershaw's death," he said. "There are shipping agents who may remember the route, and former military acquaintances who may know whether he returned." "Do you believe he's alive?" "I don't know. Would he testify?" "That depends on what he fears more now than he did then." Nicholas's card arrived the following afternoon. Imogen read it twice before telling the innkeeper she would receive him at 4, with Maud present and the door open. Nicholas entered without insignia, flowers, or gifts. He remained near the chair closest to the entrance until Imogen indicated he might sit. His gaze went to her face, not the miniature. "Mr. Finch told me Edwin made a statement," he said. "Only after it was sealed?" "Yes. And the repair ticket?" "He told me you found evidence connected to the pistol. He gave no details without your permission." Imogen nodded. "Then he has followed instructions." Nicholas placed his gloves across one knee. "I came to apologize." "You've apologized before." "Not for the full injury." He did not move closer. "I'm sorry for the wager. I'm sorry I chose you, as though your feelings were a stage on which I could prove something about myself. I'm sorry I allowed you to set terms while concealing the reason our acquaintance began. I'm sorry I repeated the lie about Matthew's death after you had trusted me enough to stand at Cinderdown. And I'm sorry I told myself that controlling the moment of truth was different from controlling you." Imogen watched him. "Do you expect the sittings to continue?" "No." "The public appearances?" "No." "Any form of courtship?" Pain crossed his face, but he answered without delay. "No, then what do you expect?" "Nothing. I wanted the apology to reach you without a request attached." Silence settled between them. He did not touch her, lower his voice into intimacy, or ask whether she had missed him. Imogen gave him instructions concerning Edwin's safety, the clerk assigned to watch for interference, and the separate custody of every document. Nicholas accepted each condition. When she rose, he rose at once. "Mrs. Kershaw." "Your Grace." He bowed and left. Edwin entered from the adjoining room after the outer door closed. He had heard enough to know Nicholas had not defended himself. "There's one thing you haven't asked," he said. Imogen turned. "What is it?" Edwin looked toward the empty doorway. "Has His Grace told you why Captain Kershaw accepted the duel at all?" "I encouraged him," Nicholas said. The words entered the room before he had removed his gloves before Mrs. Maud Kershaw had settled beside the open adjoining door, before Imogen had decided whether to offer him a chair. He stood near the entrance of the Lewes lodging in a plain dark coat, his hat beneath one arm, his face stripped of every expression he had once used to make difficult truths easier to receive. Imogen remained beside the window. Matthew's unfinished miniature rested against the black ribbon at her throat. "Say it again," she said. Nicholas set down his hat and gloves. "I encouraged Matthew to accept the duel." Maud's needle stopped above the linen in her lap. Imogen felt the room narrow until only Nicholas and the sentence remained. "Edwin asked whether you'd told me why Matthew went to Cinderdown," she said. "You hadn't." "No. Why?" "Because this is the part that makes my conduct impossible to describe as protection." He did not sit. Barnaby and Matthew argued after dinner at Bexborough. Barnaby had lost heavily at cards and asked Matthew for money. Matthew refused. He said Barnaby had already borrowed from men who couldn't afford the friendship. A painful warmth touched Imogen's memory. Matthew had possessed a talent for turning moral judgment into a sentence sharp enough to be remembered. "Barnaby insulted him," Nicholas continued. "He called him a dependent officer living on Halewood favor. He said Matthew had married above his means and survived on whatever scraps my house chose to provide." "What did Matthew do?" "He struck Barnaby across the face with his glove." Imogen closed her fingers around the miniature, and Barnaby demanded satisfaction. "Yes." Matthew accepted. "Yes. Where were you?" "Beside him." "And you did nothing." Nicholas's gaze remained on hers. "I did worse." The answer held no attempt to lessen itself. "You came to Halewood House that evening. You asked whether Barnaby had challenged him." The memory returned with terrible precision. Candlelight against the study walls. Matthew standing near the bookcase and refusing to meet her eyes. Nicholas at the mantel, calm enough to make fear seem foolish. "You told me it had been settled," Imogen said. "I lied. I asked you not to let him go. You did." "What did you promise me?" Nicholas drew one breath. "I said I would bring him home safely." The old wound did not reopen. It had never closed. "After I left, did Matthew still intend to fight?" Nicholas looked down at his bare hands. He began to reconsider. Maud's needle slipped into her lap. Neither woman moved to retrieve it. "He said Barnaby's insult wasn't worth making you a widow. He said men would gossip for a month and forget." He wanted to withdraw. Imogen heard her own pulse. "Then why did he not?" Nicholas lifted his eyes. "Because I told him withdrawal would follow him through every officer's mess and drawing room in London. I told him Barnaby would call him a coward. I said that if I acted as his second, I could control the distance, the pistols, the count, and the outcome." "You made pride sound like safety." "Yes." "Whose pride?" "His and mine." The distinction mattered. Imogen had spent 7 years hearing that Matthew's temper, Matthew's honor, Matthew's choice had carried him to Cinderdown. Nicholas was finally placing his own hand upon the road. "Did you believe no one would be hurt?" she asked. "I believed I could prevent it." "That isn't what I asked." Nicholas did not look away. "No, I knew harm was possible. I decided the risk was acceptable, because I thought I could govern it." Imogen turned toward the window. Below, a cart rolled through the street, its wheels passing over the stones without violence. "You said 1 and 2, yes." "Barnaby fired before 3. "Yes." "Matthew had not fired." "No." She faced him again. "And afterward, I found the unused mate to Matthew's pistol. I knew Barnaby had brought another weapon. I locked all three inside the walnut case. My father threatened your annuity and Matthew's standing. Barnaby's influence reached into the county and the regiment. Those threats were real. Nicholas's voice lowered. But they were not the whole reason I lied. What was the whole reason? There isn't one reason clean enough to carry all of it. He stepped no closer. I feared inquiry into my role as second. I feared what my father would do to preserve House Halewood. I feared losing office, friendships, and the reputation that made every room listen when I spoke. Most of all, I couldn't bear to admit that Matthew had wanted to come home and I had persuaded him to remain. Silence settled over the room. Imogen could see no charm in him now, no Duke arranging an acceptable shape for guilt. "You watched me thank you," she said. "Yes." "You heard me say you had protected Matthew's honor." "Yes." "And you knew your pride had helped put him on that field." Nicholas's face tightened, but he did not seek mercy in the pain. "Yes." Imogen moved away from the window. What will you do with this confession?" "Write it in full, sign it, give it to Mr. Finch. Submit it before the magistrates. I'll resign my county office and answer for my conduct without asking House Halewood to shield me." "Even if Barnaby is never convicted?" "Yes. Even if your father's old arguments prove correct and society remembers only that a Duke arranged an unlawful duel?" "Yes. Even if I never forgive you." Nicholas's breath caught, almost too quietly to hear. "Especially then. Truth can't depend upon what it earns from you." The answer entered the place where anger had lived, and did not displace it. Nothing could. Yet something beside anger changed. For the first time, Nicholas had told the ugliest part before being forced to choose between confession and exposure. He had not arranged a safe distance from the consequence. "Sit," Imogen said. Nicholas obeyed. Maud remained by the open door, present but motionless. Imogen stood before Nicholas and looked at his hands resting upon his knees. He had removed his gloves upon entering, as though he understood there should be no barrier between confession and judgment. "This is the first truth you've told me without arranging where I must stand afterward," she said. Something in his face gave way. Not dramatically. His shoulders lowered by the smallest degree, as though the effort of remaining upright had finally become visible. "I don't know how to ask you for anything now," he said. "Then don't. I won't." Imogen reached down and touched the back of his hand. Nicholas did not turn his palm or close his fingers around hers. He remained still beneath the choice she had made. The warmth of his skin rose against her fingertips. She had touched him before through grief, uncertainty, and formal permission. This touch was different. She knew the whole shape of the wound he had helped create, and she was not pretending tenderness altered it. Nicholas looked up at her but did not move. Imogen placed her other hand against his shoulder. Then, before caution could transform feeling into another argument, she stepped between his knees and put her arms around him. Nicholas did not embrace her at once. He waited until she leaned fully against him, until her cheek rested near his temple and her breath warmed the side of his face. Only then did his arms rise around her. He held her carefully, with no claim in the pressure and no attempt to make the moment last beyond her will. Imogen closed her eyes. For 2 breaths she allowed herself to feel the simple human relief of not carrying Matthew's last words alone. Nicholas's breath broke once near her hair. He said nothing. The embrace did not forgive the wager. It did not erase the lawn at Bexborough, the keeper's lodge, or the promise he had broken. It only allowed grief and love, guilt and comfort, to exist in the same room without one being used to silence another. Imogen released him first. Nicholas let her go at once. "Tenderness is an absolution," she said. "I know. You'll write the statement before leaving loose." "Yes. I'll read every word before Mr. Finch seals it. Every word. And you won't shorten what you've told me to preserve your office." "No." Nicholas rose and reached for his gloves, though he did not put them on. "Imogen." She waited. He looked as though he wanted to say something more personal, something that might turn the embrace into a promise. Instead, he bowed. "Thank you for hearing the truth." Her expression hardened gently. "Don't thank me for surviving it." "No," he said. "I won't." He left without asking when he might see her again. That same afternoon, while Imogen remained in Luce, a note bearing Lady Constance Dunstan's name reached the Bloomsbury studio. It claimed she wished to retrieve an ivory sample left during her earlier visit. The temporary charwoman airing the rooms admitted her. Constance opened the portfolio she had seen beside Imogen's easel, removed the charcoal study of Nicholas, and retied the ribbon with the knot facing inward. She did not notice that Imogen always tied it toward the light. By the 10th of July, London had learned enough of Imogen Kershaw's disgrace to make her presence at the artist's conversazione in Cavendish Square an event before she entered the room. She arrived beside Mrs. Maud Kershaw in unadorned black silk, Matthew's unfinished miniature resting at her throat, and no trace of retreat in her posture. They had returned from Lewes 2 days earlier. That morning, Maud's regular housemaid had found the studio portfolio retied with its knot facing inward. The charcoal study of Nicholas was gone. Mr. Finch had questioned the temporary charwoman, who aired the rooms during their absence. By evening, the woman had signed a statement admitting that Lady Constance Dunstan had presented a note requesting an ivory sample, entered the studio, and remained alone beside the portfolio while the charwoman fetched wrapping cloth. Imogen carried a copy of that statement in her reticule. She needed it sooner than expected. Near the center of the exhibition room, Constance stood beside an easel veiled in pale silk. Barnaby waited at her shoulder. When Imogen came within sight, Constance drew away the covering. Nicholas's charcoal likeness appeared beneath the chandeliers, stripped of sash and insignia, his mouth softened by the moment after laughter. Beside it lay a copied transcription of the wager. An exhibition catalogue had been opened beneath the drawing, and someone had written Captain Matthew Kershaw's name below Imogen's entry. The first murmur traveled through the room before Constance spoke. "Mrs. Kershaw, I thought London should see the study that inspired such unusual devotion." Imogen stopped several paces from the easel. "That drawing was taken from my studio." "Taken?" Constance widened her eyes. "It was delivered among the materials for display. From a closed portfolio in rooms you entered under a false pretense." Barnaby moved forward. "Careful. You've developed a habit of turning grief into accusation. And your family has developed a habit of entering places where it has no permission." Constance touched the copied wager. "His Grace selected you as the object of a 6-week challenge. Soon afterward, you began making private studies of him while reviving an old allegation against my father. Some may wonder whether mourning became ambition." Imogen looked at the charcoal face she had drawn in her own studio, then at Matthew's name written beneath it, as though the dead had been summoned to condemn the living. "You want me to prove I loved my husband by refusing ever to love again," she said. "I won't." The room became still. The sittings were supervised. Mrs. Maud remained within sight or hearing. "The study belongs to me because it is my work. Matthew's death belongs to the truth because it is not yours to rewrite. Neither fact becomes shameful because affection may exist where grief already lives." Barnaby smiled without warmth. "Affection is a convenient word. A widow fails to win the duke chosen for a wager, then accuses his oldest associate of dishonor." "I haven't failed to win anything," Imogen replied. "I was never a prize, and neither was his grace." A movement at the doorway drew every gaze. Nicholas entered in a plain dark coat. He saw the stolen drawing, the wager copy, and Imogen standing before them. He did not cross to her. Instead, he faced the room. "Mrs. Kershaw did not know the terms of the wager when I approached her," he said. "She established conditions for every meeting because she mistrusted my intentions. She was right to do so." Constance's composure faltered. "Nicholas, you don't have to humiliate yourself for her. I'm correcting my own conduct." He looked toward Imogen and stopped, leaving the rest to her. Maud stepped beside the easel and opened a folded paper. "The woman who admitted Lady Constance to Mrs. Kershaw's rooms has signed this statement before Mr. Finch and his clerk. Lady Constance claimed she had left an ivory sample. She was alone beside the portfolio. The drawing was missing when the rooms were reopened. The hostess extended one hand. Maud gave her the copy. She read enough to change expression. "Lady Constance, did Mrs. Kershaw authorize you to remove this work?" "I was told it had been offered for display." "By whom?" Constance glanced at Barnaby. He offered no name. The hostess ordered the wager copy removed and the charcoal returned to its owner. Lady Granville, standing near the front, said, "A woman's profession is not made less respectable because others find her private work useful for gossip." Agreement followed, quiet at first, and then unmistakable. The room had not changed because Imogen spoke beautifully. It changed because ownership, witness, and access had been proved. Barnaby understood the difference. His expression hardened. Imogen lifted the charcoal study from the easel. The lower corner had been bent, but the face remained intact. "Mrs. Kershaw," Barnaby said, "you may persuade this room that a stolen sketch is a great crime. You still have no proof my father's name belongs beside your husband's death." "Your name," Imogen corrected, "and the proof is being secured where neither of us can reach it." Nicholas watched Barnaby hear the word secured. For the first time that evening, the Marquis looked afraid. Imogen left before the crowd could turn justice into spectacle. Nicholas followed only after she gave the smallest nod. Later, in the Bloomsbury studio, he placed the recovered charcoal study on her work table. Maud sat in the adjoining room with the door open, repairing the portfolio ribbon. "Mr. Finch has the charwoman's original statement," Nicholas said. "Constance's false note is being compared with her hand. The theft matters, but it won't distract from Cinderdown. It won't." Imogen examined the bent corner. "You let me answer for myself. Tonight. I nearly crossed the room the moment I saw the drawing. Why didn't you? Because I've spent too much of my life mistaking my urgency for another person's need." The answer settled softly between them. Nicholas stood on the far side of the table, close enough for Imogen to see the strain beneath his composure. "There's something I want to ask," he said. "You may refuse without explanation." Her pulse changed. "Ask, I want to kiss you." He did not move. "But I won't treat the embrace in Luz as permission, and I won't use tenderness to make you forget what still has to be answered. May I kiss you?" Imogen looked at the man in the charcoal study, caught between laughter and restraint. Then she looked at the man before her, waiting without performance. "Yes," she said. Nicholas stepped forward only after the word. Imogen placed one hand against his coat and closed the remaining distance herself. His hand rose toward her cheek, then paused until she leaned into it. The kiss was slow and careful. It carried no triumph and asked for no promise. Imogen answered him freely, feeling his breath catch when he realized she would. When she ended the kiss, she did not step away at once. "The examination must continue," she said, "even if it destroys whatever this becomes. Yes, even if your confession cost you office, friends, and standing. Yes, even if loving me gives society another reason to call your judgment corrupt." Nicholas lowered his hand. "I would distrust any love that asked it not to." A hard knock sounded below. Maud crossed the adjoining room and returned with a sealed note bearing Barnaby's crest. Nicholas opened it in Imogen's presence. His expression changed. "What is it?" she asked. He folded the paper once. "Roxford has challenged me to meet him with pistols before dawn." Nicholas read Barnaby's challenge twice, though the meaning had been clear from the first line. Lord Roxford demanded satisfaction before dawn, with pistols, for the public injury done to Lady Constance's honor and to his own name. A second folded sheet specified the distance, the ground, and the expectation that each man appoint a gentleman to act for him. Imogen watched Nicholas's face harden beneath the old discipline of rank. His shoulders straightened. His mouth became still. For one dangerous instant he looked like the man who had once believed violence could be made safe by rules. "You are considering it," she said, Mrs. Maud Kershaw remained in the adjoining room beside the open door, her hands resting motionless upon the repaired portfolio ribbon. Nicholas lowered the papers. "If I refuse, Barnaby will call it proof that my accusations are cowardice. They are not your accusations alone. No, and they won't become more truthful because you stand opposite him with a pistol." Nicholas crossed to the studio window, carrying the challenge but not reading it again. There are men who will hear refusal and nothing else. Those men heard Matthew called a coward and thought a field could settle it. He turned. Imogen stood beside the work table, close enough for him to see that the kiss between them had not weakened her judgment. "Barnaby wants you to return to the same language that protected him 7 years ago," she said. "Private ground, male witnesses, weapons. a story controlled afterward by whoever remained standing. I know what he's doing, do you? Her voice stayed quiet, because part of you still wants to answer him in the language he chose. Nicholas looked down at the challenge. I could end the threat he poses. You could create another death that obscures the first. I don't intend to be killed. Neither did Matthew. The words struck him cleanly. Imogen continued before pain could become argument. If you meet him, what happens to Edwin's testimony if you're injured? What happens to your signed confession? What happens to the sealed pistol case? What happens if Barnaby is hurt and Constance claims the evidence was manufactured by a rival who wanted him dead? Nicholas said nothing. And what happens to me? Imogen asked. His gaze lifted. Am I to wait for another carriage from another field because a man I love decided his reputation mattered more than the truth already secured? The last words changed the room. Nicholas stared at her, but she did not let him turn them into escape. Don't use that to avoid the question. I won't. Then hear me. I won't remain beside a man who answers Matthew's death by risking another duel. If you accept, you choose the same code that killed him. You choose it over the life you claim to be building differently. Nicholas folded the challenge along its original crease. You're asking me to let society call me a coward. I'm asking you to decide whether society's opinion governs your courage. He looked toward the charcoal study on her table. In it, she had drawn him without sash, title, or defense. I don't know how to refuse without making every whisper louder, he said. Then learn. Imogen stepped back. Not for me. If you refuse only to keep me, the choice will fail the moment losing me seems inevitable. Nicholas absorbed that without protest. I need the night. Take it. Will you receive me tomorrow? If you come without a second and without plans for dawn. He bowed. Then I'll come alone. Nicholas did not sleep. Before sunrise, he walked through Halewood House and entered the portrait gallery where the wager had begun. The shelf beneath his father's portrait stood empty. The walnut pistol case remained sealed in Mr. Finch's Chancery Lane strong room, beyond Nicholas's reach by his own order. He stood before the absence and understood why Barnaby's challenge tempted him. A pistol offered immediate action. Law required patience, humiliation, witnesses, records, and surrender of control. At 9 o'clock, Nicholas summoned Mr. Finch, two gentlemen who knew of the challenge, and the senior secretary who kept his county correspondence. Barnaby's messenger was admitted to the morning room. Nicholas placed the challenge and the unopened pistol instructions upon the table. Inform Lord Roxford that I refuse. The messenger stared. One of the gentlemen shifted uneasily. Your Grace, perhaps the terms might be adjusted. No terms will make an unlawful duel honorable. Nicholas faced the witnesses. Lord Roxford has attempted to answer evidence with violence. I will answer him before magistrates. He gave the challenge and unopened instructions to Mr. Finch. Then he signed a letter addressed to the Lord Lieutenant of Sussex. I resign my office as Deputy Lieutenant pending examination of my conduct in 1811. The elder witness stepped forward. Redminster, that is not required. It is required because I used public standing while concealing private wrongdoing. Nicholas sealed the resignation before anyone could convert concern into persuasion. Mr. Finch waited until the messenger had gone. There is another development, he said. Charles Vale has been found. Nicholas's attention sharpened. Where? He entered England through Portsmouth 4 days ago. A former military acquaintance gave his lodging. He refused to speak to my clerk, but he has agreed to attend if the Lewes magistrates require him in writing. Does Roxford know? A shipping agent connected to his household made inquiries yesterday. I believe he does. Nicholas looked toward the unopened instructions. Barnaby had not sent the challenge merely from wounded pride. Vale's return had shortened the time in which intimidation might still work. Secure the summons, Nicholas said, and tell the magistrates Edwin's address must remain concealed. Mrs. Kershaw already required it. Then follow her instruction. Over the next 5 days, the evidence moved under written custody. The walnut case left Chancery Lane in Mr. Finch's carriage with his clerk beside it. Its 2 seals were recorded intact at departure. The repair ticket numbered 214, Edwin Rusk's statement, Barnaby's challenge, and Nicholas's confession traveled in separate sealed packets. Each transfer bore a date, destination, signature, and receipt. Nicholas touched none of them. By the 16th of July, all had entered the custody of the Lewes magistrates. That afternoon, Nicholas called at Imogen's studio. Maud remained in the adjoining room. He placed copies of the receipts on the work table. "The seals were intact on arrival," he said. "The magistrates will examine the field on the 18th. Edwin has agreed to attend. The gunmaker will come. Vale has received the written request." Imogen read every receipt before looking up. "And your resignation?" "Sent and acknowledged." "Do you regret it?" "I regret making it necessary." Nicholas stood across from her in the plain dark coat she had first required for the portrait. "At Cinderdown. Where do you want me?" "Beside me." "Never in front of my testimony." "Beside you," he repeated. "If the magistrates question you, answer without making me defend your motives." "I will." "If Barnaby insults you, you will not answer with honor." "I will answer with truth." The room became very still. Nicholas looked at her with none of the certainty a duke was trained to display. "I'm afraid you may love only the man I'm trying to become," he said, "not the man who failed you." Imogen did not soften the answer. "Those men aren't separate. I know. I can't love you by pretending the failure belonged to someone else." "I wouldn't ask it," his voice lowered. "I love you, Imogen. I love you without any right to ask what it will purchase." The words held no proposal, bargain, or plea for absolution. Imogen crossed the space between them and took his hand. "I love you, Nicholas. That is why I won't help you escape the cost of truth." His fingers closed around hers. Neither moved closer. They stood hand in hand while Maud quietly turned toward the window, granting the silence its dignity. Nicholas did not raise Imogen's hand to his lips. He simply held it, and she held him in return. At dawn on the 18th of July, 2 magistrates arrived at Cinderdown Field with their clerk, 4 sealed evidence packets, and the walnut pistol case. Dawn had barely cleared the beach line when the 2 magistrates reached Cinderdown Field, followed by their clerk, Mr. Finch, and the carriage carrying the walnut pistol case under guard. No crowd waited beneath the trees. Only those required for the examination had been admitted to the ground. Mrs. Maud Kershaw stood beside Imogen near the keeper's lodge. Nicholas remained on Imogen's other side, close enough to answer if called, and no farther forward than she had permitted. Lord Barnaby Dunstan waited near the second beach with Lady Constance and a widowed aunt who had been asked to accompany her. Edwin Rusk stood apart from them, his cap clasped between both hands. The retired gunmaker, the former estate surgeon, Charles Vale, Mr. Copley, and 2 attendants completed the gathering. The elder magistrate removed his gloves. "This is a sight inspection and examination concerning the death of Captain Matthew Kershaw on the 3rd of October, 1811. It is not a trial. Statements will be taken under oath. The weapons will remain unloaded. Every item opened here will return to official custody." His clerk recorded the hour, the weather, and the names of those present. Mr. Copley identified the Halewood steward's seal on the walnut case. Mr. Finch identified his own. Both wax impressions were intact. The crossed ribbons had not been cut. The separately sealed key envelope bore the same signatures entered on the transfer receipt prepared in London. Only after the clerk had copied each detail did the magistrate turn to Imogen. "Mrs. Kershaw, you requested correction of the account, under which your husband's death was described. You may begin." Imogen stepped onto the strip of ground between the first beach and the keeper's lodge. Matthew's unfinished miniature rested against the black ribbon at her throat. She opened the oval case and held the painted profile in her palm. "My husband was carried from this field to that lodge shortly before midnight," she said. "He remained conscious when I reached him." Lord Roxford stood near the hearth. His Grace stood beside the table. Matthew looked at me and said, "He fired before 3. Nicholas saw. By morning I was told that he had died during private target practice." The same account was repeated by the household and preserved for 7 years. Barnaby shifted his weight. "A grieving widow's recollection is not proof." The younger magistrate looked toward him. "You will answer when called, Lord Roxford." Imogen did not turn. "I do not ask you to accept my memory because I loved him. I ask that it be considered beside the witnesses, the weapons, and the admissions already secured." She closed the miniature but kept it in her hand. Edwin Rusk was sworn next. His voice shook on his name and steadied on the facts. He walked to the eastern beach and indicated where he had stood. I heard His Grace begin the count. 1. Then 2. The shot came before 3. Did Captain Kershaw fire? The elder magistrate asked. No, sir. His pistol was still lifting. Whom did you see holding the discharged weapon? Edwin looked directly at Barnaby. Lord Roxford. Barnaby gave a contemptuous breath. A laborer who fled the estate has had 7 years to invent courage. Edwin's hands tightened around his cap. Imogen met his eyes. He continued. His lordship's steward came to my cottage before sunrise. He said, my daughter's husband would lose his place, and my family would lose our home if I spoke of the count. I left before the week ended. The former estate surgeon then confirmed that Matthew had remained capable of brief, coherent speech after being carried into the lodge. He understood who was present, the surgeon said. He recognized his wife. His condition allowed a short statement. Barnaby said nothing. The clerk brought forward the original inventory made at Halewood House, and the receipts recording each transfer from the portrait gallery to Chancery Lane, then from Chancery Lane to Luce. Mr. Copley confirmed that the case had been examined in its original position before being moved. Mr. Finch confirmed that the 2 seals applied on the 12th of June were the same seals now before them. The ribbons were cut. The key envelope was opened. When the lid rose, the 3 pistols lay in their fitted green baize hollows exactly as recorded. The gunmaker examined the Halewood pair first. These were made together, he said. Their weight, balance, and trigger resistance are intended to match. He then lifted the 3rd weapon. After the clerk recorded every movement, the gunmaker removed the grip plate and exposed the full serial. 214. Mr. Finch opened a separate packet and produced the vellum repair ticket. The number matched. The entry bore Barnaby's name and a date several weeks before Matthew's death. What alteration does it record? The younger magistrate asked. A light-set trigger, fitted at Lord Roxford's request. Could ordinary wear produce the same result? No. Demonstrate the difference. With every chamber confirmed empty, the gunmaker tested the 2 Halewood mechanisms. Each required firm pressure. The 3rd released beneath a much lighter touch. The click was small, almost delicate. It carried across the field. Constance looked at her father. Barnaby's face remained rigid. A repair ticket proves ownership, he said. It does not prove I brought that weapon here. That is why Mr. Vale has been required to attend, the magistrate replied. Charles Vale stepped forward reluctantly. He looked older than Nicholas remembered, though fear had preserved something youthful in the way he avoided Barnaby's gaze. After taking the oath, he admitted acting as Barnaby's second. The matched pistols were brought for the meeting, he said. Lord Roxford arrived with another weapon concealed beneath his coat. Did you know it was not part of the agreed pair? Yes. Did you know the trigger had been altered? No. I swear I didn't. What happened to the weapon afterward? Vale swallowed. Lord Roxford told me to place it in the walnut case. He said the Duke would manage the household and the account. Constance turned sharply. You told me His Grace invented this after Captain Kershaw died. Barnaby caught her wrist. Be silent. One of the attendants moved before Nicholas did. The magistrate ordered Barnaby to release her. Nicholas remained beside Imogen. He did not step in front of her or take command of the scene. When his name was called, he walked to the clerk's table and gave his full title for the record. I acted as Captain Kershaw's second, he said. I encouraged him not to withdraw after he had decided the insult was not worth the risk. I supplied the matched Halewood pistols. I began the count. Lord Roxford fired before I reached 3. Matthew had not fired. Afterward, I found the unused mate to Matthew's pistol. I knew another weapon had been substituted. I supported the false account of an accidental discharge and used fear concerning Mrs. Kershaw's annuity and her husband's military standing to keep her silent. I concealed my own conduct for 7 years. The elder magistrate studied him. Were you compelled to do so? No. Did Mrs. Kershaw consent to the account? No. Do you ask privilege because of your rank? No. Barnaby's control broke at last. This is a romance arranged as evidence. He has abandoned judgment for a woman who means to become a duchess. Nicholas did not answer. Imogen stepped forward with Matthew's miniature open in her hand. "My husband's death did not become true when a duke admitted it," she said. "It was true while every powerful man denied it. No one in the field moved. The magistrates ordered the pistols, repair ticket, sworn statements, challenge note, and Nicholas's confession retained under official seal. Barnaby was required to answer further proceedings. A formal report concerning his place in the commission of the peace would be sent to the proper authority. Nicholas's resignation as deputy lieutenant would be included in the record sent to the Lord Lieutenant. There was no declaration of guilt, no instant sentence, and no applause. Only ink, seals, signatures, and the refusal to let rank interrupt them again. "I want a sworn memorandum placed with the parish papers," Imogen said. "The accidental account must be withdrawn from the Halewood estate papers. A corrected memorandum must also be sent to Matthew's former regiment." "It will be done," Nicholas said. "Not as a favor, no, as correction." The clerk gathered the papers. Barnaby was escorted toward his carriage. Constance followed with her aunt, silent now. Edwin remained near the beach where he had once hidden. Imogen crossed to him first and thanked him for speaking. Only after the official examination had closed did she turn to Nicholas. She looked at the ground where the Count had failed 7 years earlier, then offered him her hand. Nicholas accepted it carefully. His fingers closed around hers without drawing her nearer. The clerk lifted the last sealed packet and called its number into the record. 3. By the 19th of October, truth had survived long enough to become ordinary work. Clerks had copied it into sworn memoranda. Solicitors had carried it beneath seal. The false account of an accidental discharge had been removed from the Halewood estate papers, and a corrective statement now rested with the parish records beside the original burial entry, rather than pretending the past could be rewritten by scraping ink from a page. A second memorandum had been sent to Matthew Kershaw's former regiment and entered among its official correspondence. Lord Barnaby Dunstan had not been convicted in the dramatic manner society preferred, but neither had rank restored his safety. He had been prevented from acting as a justice of the peace, while the report concerning his conduct remained under review. Invitations ceased. Men who had once laughed beside him now remembered urgent business when his carriage appeared. Lady Constance withdrew her accusations against Imogen and went to live with a married aunt beyond London, where distance protected what remained of her reputation, but could not return the authority she had misused. Nicholas's resignation as Deputy Lieutenant of Sussex had been accepted by the Lord Lieutenant. He made no request for reinstatement. For 3 months after Cinderdown Field, he courted Imogen with the same discipline he had once reserved for public office. He sent his card before every call. He came only when received. He wrote letters that asked no immediate answer. When one remained unopened for 4 days because Imogen was finishing a commission, he did not send another to demand attention. Their walks remained proper, with Mrs. Maud Kershaw nearby, and Lady Granville often joining them when society required a witness too influential to insult. Nicholas brought no jewels, no flowers extravagant enough to become obligations, and no gifts for the studio. Once he arrived with a newly published volume on miniature technique, then took it away again when Imogen reminded him that a useful object could burden a woman as effectively as a useless one. "You're severe," he told her. "You're learning," she replied. "Slowly. That is the first honest boast you've made." He laughed, and she found that the sound no longer reminded her of a wager. Near the end of September, Nicholas came to Bloomsbury with Mr. Finch and Lady Granville. A packet of proposed marriage settlements rested beneath Mr. Finch's arm. Nicholas remained standing until Imogen set aside her brush. Maud sat in the adjoining workroom with the door open. "I have a question," Nicholas said. "The papers suggest several. The first is whether you wish to hear a proposal from me at all." Imogen looked at him. He wore the plain dark coat she had first required for his portrait, though its simplicity no longer felt like apology. It was merely the clothing of a man who had stopped hiding behind symbols when he entered her workroom. "You may ask." Nicholas did not kneel. He knew spectacle would turn her answer into something witnessed before it had been freely given. "Imogen, will you marry me?" She did not answer at once. Once he had wagered that love could be manufactured within 6 weeks. Now he stood before her, as though refusal would wound him and still remain entirely hers to give. "The settlement first," she said. "Of course." Mr. Finch opened the packet. The studio lease would be held in trust by Mr. Finch and Lady Granville for Imogen's sole and separate use. Her professional earnings would be paid for her benefit, and could not be claimed, redirected, or managed by Nicholas or any Halewood secretary. No commission could be accepted or refused without Imogen's express decision. Matthew's papers, unfinished miniature, fencing mask, and personal effects would remain hers. Maud would receive an independent residence and annuity, not a place in the ducal household dependent upon favor. Imogen could continue signing her professional work as Imogen Kershaw. Nicholas had added one provision in his own hand. No member of any Halewood household was to describe her work as an amusement. Imogen read it twice. "This isn't a legal clause. Mr. Finch said the same. It has no proper remedy. Dismissal from my household." Lady Granville concealed a smile. "That may prove more effective than damages." Imogen looked across the papers at Nicholas. "You understand that marriage won't make the studio yours?" "Yes, or my commissions." "Yes, or Matthew's memory." His expression did not falter. "No, nothing could make that mine. And if I disagree with you in public, I'll try not to deserve it." "That isn't an answer." "Then yes. You may disagree with me wherever the truth requires it." Imogen placed her hand over the final page. "Yes." Nicholas remained still. "Yes to the settlement, yes to you." Relief passed through his face with such naked force that she almost laughed. "I will marry you." He took one step nearer and stopped. "May I hold your hands?" Imogen offered them. Nicholas closed both of his around hers, no more. Behind them, Maud became deeply interested in an empty frame, while Lady Granville turned toward the window with equal tact. The banns were called on 3 successive Sundays in Imogen's parish church. They married quietly on the 19th of October, before Maud, Lady Granville, Mr. Finch, and a small number of friends. Nicholas arrived without ducal procession. Imogen wore pale gray silk, and Matthew's miniature beneath the folds near her heart. Nicholas saw the black ribbon when she adjusted her glove. He did not look away, and he did not ask her to hide it. After the service, Imogen signed the register as Imogen Kershaw, the name she had carried into the church, and the name she would continue to place beneath her work. Nicholas signed below her with a hand steadier than the one that had once written a wager. By late afternoon they had returned to the Bloomsbury studio. Maud withdrew to her new rooms after announcing that married people should be trusted to endure 1 hour without supervision. The shutters stood open to the mild October light. Matthew's fencing mask, returned from Bexborough, rested inside a cedar chest near the work table, rather than hanging among trophies whose owners had forgotten the man behind them. Imogen sat beneath the north window with Matthew's miniature open before her. The damaged hinge had been repaired at last. Nicholas held the lamp at the angle she requested. "Higher," she said. He raised it. "Not so high." He lowered it. "You enjoy this, more than is dignified. That has never stopped a duke before." Imogen touched her brush to the unfinished background. For 7 years, Matthew's profile had floated against bare ivory because no peaceful setting had seemed honest, while an official lie surrounded his death. Now she painted a narrow line of dawn beyond him, pale gold above a distant gray horizon. It did not beautify Cinderdown. It did not suggest that grief had ended. It simply allowed mourning to exist on the far side of truth. Imogen set down the brush. "It's finished." Nicholas came nearer but did not touch the miniature. "He looks as though he's facing the light." He should have had more of it. Yes, there was no jealousy in the answer. Only sorrow that did not pretend equality with hers. Imogen signed the work with the name her clients knew. Then she placed the completed miniature upright in an open velvet stand. Beside it lay a blank ivory oval. Nicholas noticed. "Is that meant for me?" "Perhaps. You sound uncertain. I haven't decided whether your face will fit. My title usually improves the proportions." "Your title won't be painted." She looked at him. "The man will." Nicholas set down the lamp. "I love you." The words were no longer new, but neither had they become casual. Imogen looked once at Matthew's finished portrait and then at the untouched ivory waiting for Nicholas. One love did not erase the other. Truth had made room for both. "I love you too." She rose, placed one hand against his cheek, and kissed him. Nicholas waited for her touch before drawing her gently closer. The kiss was warm and unhurried, carrying no triumph and asking no promise that had not already been freely made. When it ended, Imogen remained within his arms for a quiet moment. Then she took his hand, placed the blank ivory oval in his palm, and pointed toward the straight-backed chair. "Sit." Nicholas obeyed. "And if you wish to be painted truthfully, you must remain very still. I'm married to a tyrant. You're married to an artist, far more dangerous." He sat in the plain dark coat she preferred, without sash, insignia, or practiced smile. Matthew's completed miniature remained open beside her. Nicholas's blank ivory waited beneath the light. The studio shutters stood wide to the October afternoon, and when Imogen reached for her pencil, her free hand remained resting in his.